Good. This is the Dvar Malchut. We're continuing. We'll see if we finish. If not, we'll finish tomorrow. This is Dvar Malchut, the royal words of the Rebbe that he spoke in 1992. This is very shortly before he had a stroke, which made it impossible for him to speak. So these words are very important. And the Rebbe is explaining the practical meaning to us, why it is that in the Torah, the 10 commandments are repeated. First of all, in this week's Torah portion that we're reading, that God is speaking to the Jewish people, what God says. Vaydaber Elokim is called Devarim Ha'elu Lemor, that God spoke to the Jewish people. And then later on in the book of Deuteronomy, of Devarim, Moses repeats the 10 commandments again. In Parshat Et Hanan, he repeats the 10 commandments again. Why do you have to have it twice? Why? And you could just take the Torah. Everybody had the Torah. It says even more that Moses wrote the Torah on 70 languages, on rocks, it says. In any case, everybody had the Torah. Everybody could just look at this week's Torah portion and see what it says in the Bible, what the 10 commandments are. Why did Moses have to repeat it? So it says it's something like what we just finished learning. Moses repeated the Torah because to bring the Torah more in the physical world, that it should permeate and should be, how do you say, united with every fiber and be absorbed and announced from every fiber, every atom, every human being, every moment of life in this world. So in the 10 commandments that are mentioned in this week's Torah portion, it tells us that the 10 commandments came from God, where the source was, that God was revealed in the world. God was revealed in the world. It says it's like someone who dwells in a house, and he comes and makes the house his, right? The king comes back to his palace. It's the king in the palace. Huh? You see where the king lived. What you see, that's different than if you see when the king is living in the palace. Oh, that's what's Mount Sinai. God came into the world became God's palace, God was revealed, but still it was sort of like two separate things. It was God and the world. And the world was a receptacle for God and etc., but it wasn't really united. In other words, the truth was not really totally revealed. Because the truth is that God is creating everything in the world, and everything in the world is infinitely important. It's infinitely godly. Every detail, every atom, every molecule of the world is screaming out the wonder of God. That's what was accomplished when Moses repeated the 10 commandments. He brought godliness more in the world, so to speak, from below to above. So that the degree that every single Jew, when he learns the Torah, can in some ways simulate, repeat that what was happening, that happened in Mount Sinai, that pure godliness came into the world. But then it was from God's point, God was doing it. Now we can do it. Al pi amor, according to what we said before, according to what we said before, we can explain Gamkin also a kesha, the connection in Zman with the time that we read this Parshat Yitro and the Shabbat. What's going to be the date? It happens to be that this year the date is the same as it was back then, 31 years ago, when the Rebbe said the speech, the 20th day of the month of Shvat. Shvat is the 11th month of the year. Ashtei Asor hu Chodesh Shvat. The 11th month is Shvat. Shehu, which is Gamken, also 10 days after Yud Shvat. What was Yud Shvat? Yud Shvat was the day that the passing away, so to speak, of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Nasi Dorenu. And because that comes on this Shabbat, as on Shabbat gives the blessing to all of the days. all of the days that come after this Shabbat, in other words, the coming week, are blessed from this Shabbat. This Shabbat, we read about the giving of the Torah. And it is also a continuation of the previous days of the last week, which was the 10th day of Shvat, the day of the passing away of the previous Rebbe, and also parenthetically, not parenthetically, the date when the Rebbe took over, a year after, officially took over Chabad. He became the successor of the previous Rebbe, the continuation of the previous Rebbe. And this blesses the days which come after this Shabbat, which will include also the 22nd day of Shvat, which was the 22nd day of Shvat, the day of the passing away of the previous Rebbe's daughter, who was the wife of our Rebbe, the daughter of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Chodesh, that was in 1988. Yes. Chodesh Echad Asar, this month is the 11th month of the year, is attached to the 11th, the number 11, which says Echad Asar Yom Michorev. Okay, here's an interesting thing. This is 11 days from Chorev. Chorev is Mount Sinai. This refers to the Miyuchad Shabasar. This is talking about the uniqueness of the number 10, 1 over 10, 1, which is the higher than all of the 10 utterances. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Who said the 10 commandments? Anochi. God said the 10 commandments. God, so to speak, is the number 1 which gave birth to the 10. That's 11. Hainu Echad Asar Yom Michorev, that refers to Echad Asar Shalamayla, which is above the 10 commandments which were given on Chorev. Chorev is Mount Sinai, like we said. This is the oneness of God. 11 hints at the oneness of God, from which came the 10 commandments. That's 11. Ad bechinas antu chad v'lo b'chushban, till the level of God. God is called one. We say Shema. God used yours one. Shema Yisrael. That's the motto of Judaism. God is one. But when we say that God is one, we mean not a numerical one. That God is one, but He can't be counted. There's no number 2 to God. There's not God and also the world. There's nothing except for God. That's what it means when it says that God is one. Dargat Keter, this is what's called the crown, Shalamayla, which is above all of the 10 Sfirot. This is the essence of God, which is above the whole entire creation. The whole entire creation makes it seem as though there's something other than God. But the fact is, there is nothing other than God. God is creating everything, and He's creating everything from nothing. So everything is really made from nothing. How is everything existing? It's a miracle. God is creating everything constantly from absolute nothing. We have no idea what this means, but that's what it means. So God's true oneness, that's what gives birth to everything. And this is expressed in its deepest sense in the 10 commandments, when God, from His essence, gave birth to the 10 commandments, which is the reason for creation. Okay, here we go. So this month is the 11th month. This is the 11. We just finished saying that the number 11 is a very, very supercharged number because it's showing the oneness of God, which gives birth to the 10 commandments. That's the 11. And so this is the 11th month itself. What happened on the 11th month itself? And the giving, this is the day of the passing away of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is on the 10th day, namely the 10th day, how the oneness of God is revealed in the 10th, which is connected to the number 10. The 10 is what's called the order of the creation of the world, God's 10 Sfirot. We've learned about this many times before. God's oneness is not limited to being just one separate from the world, because if so, how did the world get here? So to say God is creating the world, He created the world, He's creating the world all the time, and God has a personality. and this personality of God, that it is the means of by which He's creating the world. This is what's called God's 10 sefirot. This is a mystery which is incomprehensible. Certainly to me, it's incomprehensible. But it's how do you say, explained in this book called Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, which says was a book that was given to Abraham by God. Nosaf al Zeh, in addition to Echad Asar Mitzad Atzmo, this 11 is including also the number 10, which comes before 11, right? 10, 11. Ubechlalu tamshachas kochot makifim. In other words, it means that the number 1, which is we said is Keter, God's crown, is drawn into the 10 powers of the soul. That's like at Mount Sinai, right? That God's oneness was drawn down into the 10 utterances. Ulamai lioter, and even higher. God's essence, not just God's crown, God's essence is brought down into this low physical world. We said that's what Moses did when we repeated the Chibur, the Dibur Rishon. This is joining together the first 10 commandments. The first time 10 commandments is mentioned in the Torah with the last 10 commandments as is mentioned in this, in when Moses said. Okay, maybe just what we're talking about here. We're talking about ideally making the world into a healthy, real place, revealing all the potential that there is in the world. Maybe I'll give you an example. I'll make up this example on my own, right? Let's say you find somebody on the street. They find somebody on the street unconscious, right? The police get a call. There's an unconscious man laying on the streets, and they go and they find this guy, and he's in a coma. So what are we supposed to do with him? So they say, listen, we'll take him, put him in a bed, see what happens, give an intravenous and see what happens. So there comes along a great doctor, and he says, no, there's ways we can bring this person back to consciousness, right? They give him a shock, they give him a shot, they give him a massage, they give him a treatment, whatever they give him, the ointments and things like this, and they give him blessings, they give him all of a sudden, he opens up his mind, his eyes, and he becomes conscious. Oh, when he was unconscious, he was like a plant, right? A vegetable. He was there, he was alive, but he was a plant. All of a sudden, he opens up his eyes. Now he's moved from a plant to be an animal. He's an animal. He eats, he drinks, he responds, right? He responds. And then they start to talk to him, and all of a sudden he starts to talk. Now he's becoming a human. He can talk. And then they start to, another expert, the same expert, whatever, he says, listen, I sense that this person, when we play music, I see that he has a reaction. Let's see. So all of a sudden they reveal he's musical. The person's musical. And suddenly he's not just musical. He's a genius in music. He's a genius in music. Suddenly he realizes he's a genius in mathematics also. He sees that they can solve problems. It's a genius in mathematics and and then they realize he's a genius also in painting. He's a genius in philosophy. Suddenly they realize this person is an all-around genius. Suddenly they realize this person is an amazing doctor. He's an amazing lawyer. He can make new. All of a sudden, all this potential that was hidden in this plant suddenly becomes revealed. And he has a good sense of humor, and he makes people happy, and he's a good psychiatrist and a good psychologist, and he can make people that are miserable, he makes them joyous, and people that are scared, he makes them brave, and people is all of a sudden from this one person comes all this tremendous, amazing potential you never dreamed that when he's making inventions, and he figures out ways how to take, make seaweed into food, and how to this, and he can feed the world, think of this. Well, the fact is every human being has these potentials. Different ones, different places. Sometimes a smile from a person can do more than all of the works of all the psychiatrists in the world. Right? A good word from the janitor of the hospital can heal more people than all the doctors in it. People have tremendous potential. That's what we're trying. That's the idea of giving the Torah. Giving the Torah in the world ideally is supposed to be to bring out the godliness, to bring out the potential, the life, the love, the meaning in every single human being in the world. Every single human being in the world. And every single human being has something, right? Something at one certain time, one certain place that can add something. And certainly people have many somethings. And not everybody can appreciate everybody else, but but everyone has something that they can contribute to the world, something unique, something genius that's hiding inside of them, like this person in a coma. And the giving of the Torah is supposed to be there to wake up the whole world. That's the idea of 11. That's the idea of the Moshiach. That's the whole importance of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was the Moshiach of his generation. And this was revealed in a way that the highest way on the 11th day, on the 10th day of the month of Sivan, of Shvat, that's when the previous Rebbe passed away. The 11th day was even higher. What happened on the 11th day? The 11th day, that's when the Rebbe took over. That's when the Rebbe took over a year later from his father-in-law. Sha'az then, Yeshno Gila, there's the revelation of the 11th, Hemitzad Mispar Chadashim, whether the number of months, the 11th month, and also the number of days. The 11th day of the 11th month, that's when the Lubavitcher Rebbe took over the year after that. But Yesh Lomar, we can say, Shemikivan Shezeh Bo La'achrei Gila, because this came after the revelation of the number 10. Wow, what's this? Why is this doing this? The Chodesh of the month. Yesh Bazeh, there is also it has also the number 10. The highness of the revelation of the number 10. The Od, and even more, but often Mila, which is even higher in holiness. Shemizeh, that from this we can come to the number 11 in the month itself. In other words, the number 10, that's referring to God's 10 Sfirot, all that holiness, that's the number 10. That's represented by the previous Rebbe. He passed away on the 10th day of the month. But the Rebbe, he took over, our Rebbe, took over on the 11th day of the month. And it happened to be, it was the 11th day of Tafshin Yud Aleph. So it was, the Tafshin means it was, hey Tafshin, 5,711 years after the Kriya, the 11th. But Yeshlom, we can say Shazel, this is like the advantage of what we say, the Amiras Divros Rishonos. This is like the novelty of the first time the 10 commandments are mentioned by God. And afterwards it says the 10 commandments are mentioned by Moses. Moses, that's the number 10. He brought the 10 into the world. And especially Kasher Shabbos, Parshas Shabbos, we're reading the Torah and the 10 commandments. The Ber Elokim is called Dvar more. The bracha b'fnei v'lachrei. Why does this happen? Oh, I think it's the camera. I just hit. Sha'az then the Kodesh Baruch Hu, then God. When we read this, so God, so to speak, He's reading it opposite us. Biyoter says even more. Biyoter Oz, how much more so? Balimud inyan the Torah. And then when we read it on the days of the rest of the year, we could read the 10 commandments all the time. And now we're calling them out in the reading of the Torah. That's being read out. When are we reading out these words, the 10 commandments, on the 20th day of the month, of the 11th month? 20 is the numerical value of Keter. Esrim is Keter. How do we see Esrim? Shin Resh is 500. Ayin Yud Mem is another 100. Ayin Yud Mem is 120. 120 plus 500 is 620. What's the gematria of Keter? 620. Tough Resh is 400. Resh is 200. 620. The 20th day of the month, which that's going to be this Shabbat, that's going to be the 20th day of the month, that's the same numerical 20. Esrim is the same numerical value as Keter. That's the 11th, we said before. That's the 11th, the crown over the 10 commandments. This is the number 11. And from this we come afterwards to the 21st day of the month. Ach Tov Yisrael, only good in Israel. The 11th is Echad Asar Yom Me Asari B'Chodesh. This is 11 days from the 10th day of the month. That's 11 and 10. We just explained the 10 is like the 10 commandments, and the 11 is how they are put into the world. Zehu Ha'erev the Kaf Beis B'Chodesh. This is the day before the 22nd day of the month. This month. What's the second day of the month? This is 2 times 11. B'cha Yivarech Hashem. In you, God will be blessed. I mean, B'cha, I'm sorry, in you, Israel will be blessed. B'cha is the Gematria 22. This corresponds to the 22 letters of the Torah. The Rebbe is going through the different dates of the month of Shvat. We've talked about 11, 10, we've talked about 11, we've talked about 20, 21, 22. To bring down all of this godliness into an inside way, like we said, waking up this world from its comatose state and revealing its potential. V'yesh, see if we can also add on, B'kesher. Why is this happening? All right, I don't know. May have to buy a new camera. Maybe not. It's sort of interesting on this. Yesh, see if we can add on the kasher, and we can attach this also to the parsha of Mishpatim. That's next week's Torah portion, but we read it this week in Mincha prayer that we're beginning to read in the prayer of Mincha. HaParsha shel hayamim haboim, and the days which come, all of the days of next week, we're going to be reading Mishpatim. These are the laws that you should put in front of them. Omer Chazal, the rabbis say, Ma Rishonim Sinai, just like the first came from Sinai, also these came from Sinai. Hainu, namely, Shagama mitzvahs sichlios, also the intellectual commandments, Hakashurim, which are connected to the physical world, they also come from Mount Sinai. What's Mishpatim, the next week's Torah portion? Next week's Torah portion is a portion that maybe we can say shouldn't really be in the Bible, because it seems to be totally nothing to do with God and nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's talking about, if a person has an ox and somebody else steals the ox, or somebody else kills my ox or steals my sheep, or what's going to be, or if I have this type of a servant, that type of a servant, a Jewish servant, a man servant, a woman servant, a non-Jewish servant. What's this got to do with godliness, with holiness, with religion, with anything? These are all mundane laws that are all talking about only physical interactions between people, damages and things. We should know that these also came from God's essence. The diuk, exactly like the 10 commandments from Mount Sinai. Al derech malahal and be'ema, just like when in Mount Sinai, it was in shaking and trepidation because of the revelation of God, so it also should be now. And the same thing when we learn these mundane laws next week, it's all the word of God. And this is revealed in a way of ve'ela mishpatim. These, what does it mean? When you point to something, you say, these are ve'ela, not those. Ve'ela, and these are, you point with your finger and say, these are ele. And tasim lifnechem, you should feel the godliness. It should be something in front of you. You should put it in front of you. The word lifneim means in front of you, but it also means inside of you. Lifneim means inside. Omer lo Kodesh Baruch Hu, God said to Moses, Lo talel datcha, you shouldn't think, Lomer, to say, Asheneh lahem perek v'halacha, I'll teach them the laws, the chapter, and 1 or 2 laws, 2 or 3 times. I'll teach them the laws 2 or 3 times. And I don't have to worry if they really understood the reasons for the things or not. The main thing, they should know what to do. Ubafrad, and especially given that the Torah itself is above understanding. God said to Moses, don't let it into your mind and think that, listen, I'm doing a very major thing. I'm bringing godliness. I'm telling the Jewish people what God wants. It's enough that they should just understand what to do and not understand why they should do it. After all, they should do it because God said, that's all. God said to Moses, don't think that that's your job is going to be done when you just tell the people. Lokach, therefore, it says, Asher tasim lifneihem. You have to put it inside of them. And also you have to put it before them. What does it mean? Kashulchan aruch, like a table that's all set. Muchan lechol lifnei adam. Right? Like you go to a restaurant, you order food. They don't bring you raw food and say, okay, here it is. You ordered a steak. Here's a steak. Cook it yourself. Right? You got a steak. Where are you going to get a steak from? We're bringing a nice steak. You have to cook it yourself. What type of a thing is? No, we'll let you use our ovens. You know what? Go in the back room. You can use our oven and cook it yourself. No one wants a thing like that. God says the same thing with the Torah. You can't just take these laws and put it in front of them and say, okay, figure it out yourself. And the main thing is just to do it. No, you have to put it in front of like a table that's already set up, Shagam tamei adavar, also the reasons for the things, the explanations you have to put in front of the Jewish people, bifneim, like a table that's set, it's all ready to eat. What does eating mean? Eating means it becomes like flesh and blood. Well, the Hosi, if we can also add on to what the Yerushalmi says, tasim, it says the word tasim, it comes from the language of a sima. What's sima? A precious treasure, a otzer. The Torah should be tasim, you should make it precious, valuable to the Jews. Shagam otzrut Shabbat, that also the precious secrets of the Torah, the inside of the Torah, that on itself are concealed and that's connected with the inside of God, right? God creates the world. So we do with the world what God says. You do the Torah and the commandments, and that's enough, right? Not right. If you can't do any more than this, but the Jews can do more. You have to explain to them the preciousness of the Torah, the godliness which is in the Torah. Tzarichim lavo, it has to be tasim lifneim, it has to be before them, and it has to also be lifneim inside of them in a revealed way. As we will continue, God willing, tomorrow, on Friday, we'll finish this, God willing, tomorrow. Wow, I think this spirituality, this picture is sort of getting out of control. I'll have to get a new camera. All right, sort of interesting. Avant-garde. All right, there we go. Well, so, all right, now let's do the Yom Yom. We'll do the Yom Yom for today.